Good afternoon and most welcome to 1160 of the Heidegger series. This is going to be looking to the more abstract and less practical way. We are going to look into the body and do some exercises. And to cite Alexander, movement of the body is the most abstract a human being is capable of. The more refined the bodily movement, the more refined the thinking. But what is practical, down to earth, gritty and oily, is what modern man tries to call thinking. That is, thinking in the head is as far from knowing, understanding and thinking as possible. And when I read this line from Friedrich Matthias Alexander, I also think about Martin Heidegger, who he attacks modern thinking as being repetitious, being coarse, being all the things that we blame the body for being: unimportant, reactive, tend to be subjective. We often say the soul is strong but the body is weak, and thereby meaning the body does its things but the soul knows what to do. But the thing is, we know now the soul is here, and referring to the soul somewhere else, it is taking the soul away. And we turn into reactive organisms, no better than simple creatures living in ponds. I usually think of Sybil Forty scolding her husband when he contracted the Irishman to do the construction in his home instead of the reliable carpenter. And he tells the Irish carpenter, "I seen better organized creatures swimming around on their backs in puddles than you are." And then the Irishman goes, "Oh, I like a lady with a good humor." Then he has to taste the umbrella hitting him over the back. It was a fun episode, but duly noted, in this episode Sybil took to violence. I think that was unusual otherwise. I think her husband, Basil, was more prone to violence than Sybil. I have a very good example how body priming affects thinking to a very high degree. Yesterday I was looking for a mouse, and I know the mouse that I wanted to have, the mouse I remember buying in Skara. It did have Bluetooth. It was a Bluetooth mouse. So I went looking in the cabinet and I found this one. But as you can see, this one is equipped with a dongle. So it's not what I was intending on having. I wanted a Bluetooth mouse, I think. So we see bifurcation here: Bluetooth mouse and dongle mouse. Dongle mouse are considered to be more cheap, primitive maybe. And I was a bit confused. I have no memory of buying a dongle mouse. I have a memory of buying a Bluetooth mouse, and then I don't find it. It was very confusing. Actually, it dawned on me now, and it would not have dawned on me if I hadn't done exercise. Well, it was more than exercise, a yoga practice previously. And all of a sudden, the intellect started to work again. The solution was, oddly enough, complementarity. Yes, this is a dongle mouse, but it is also a Bluetooth mouse. I never heard of it, but it has both capacities.
Killing two mouses with one.
Or rather, something really weird, because that's extra It costs extra for them to do this. And this is complementarity. I never heard about such a thing before in my life. But if I were open-minded, I would have thought in a wider area. I would have thought I have only bought one mouse. In some way it has to be this one. And this is what Alexander says. If we don't take care of inhibition, thinking is the first victim, not the body. Thinking is what's first to disappear. And he mentions in the constructive conscious control, even if I would have been a crippled for misusing my body, I wouldn't have cared. But only when I understood that my intellect was crippled, then I got the motivation. And I'm sure nobody should do the Alexander technique if they don't see what it does to the intellect. That it was the important thing, not the body. Well, the body is important secondarily, but we need to care for the intellect. And that is the good way of approaching the technique. But I will today show it from a completely different angle. We're going to jump into the Asian tradition of calligraphy. I have this rather unusual book here by William Reed. It's a person I was supposed to meet in the 90s. It never happened, but he's very interesting. He writes a sort of Western approach to the art of calligraphy in Japan. It is called Shodo. And he tries to explain for me as a Westerner why we should do it. Usually the case in Japan, they never explain anything. They just do it. It could be that their intellect is constantly active, so they don't have a need to explain what is evident. Training of the intellect comes through the hand. Why is that? Well, I think we pretty well know by now that man became intelligent when using his or her hand. In the development of tools in the late Neolithic period. And we have already sort of dwindled into cavemen and how they learn abstraction by doing. And refined abstraction, we know from Lakoff Johnson, can only be done, or you can propose if you want, can only be done if the body is in balance, because it is still motoric movement. Barbara Tversky showed that in a rather big research where she checked out people who solved difficult problems, and when they thought they weren't being watched, they start to use their hands to understand. This is how we think. We use our hands. It is not always that the hands move, but it's still a muscular, minuscular movement in the fingers, in the arms, in the thumb. Because in human beings, in contrast to, for instance, the chimpanzee, the hand takes a much more neurological load than even the face. The hand is massive. This is supposed to be a hand. So many neurons go to our hand, and that makes us human, I would say. It makes us exquisitely different from the animals. That ability to use our hands and thereby making what Barbara Tversky said, the biggest revolution that ever happened to any animal. The going from being unconscious, unthinking, just reactive in the situation, and going to be able to understand things. That is the birth of the reflective consciousness. The birth of man, I would say. A way into that is priming. It's an opener to more perception, because not only are we blocked off from thinking, we're also blocked off from reflection. We can no longer see our own thinking, and thereby we cannot judge the quality of it. And this is something that is proven in many investigations. People who do thinking on a regular basis sometimes are good at it, sometimes not, but that they cannot tell when's when, and that is disastrous. If they don't know if their thinking is good, they don't know if they should apply it or not. If I just hurt my leg, not bad, but for the moment I blistered it somehow, then I shouldn't run that particular day in a marathon. That is true when it comes to the physical body, which we often call the material body. But it doesn't come to thinking. We don't know when the thinking doesn't work. We don't even have terms for it. In the East Asian languages you find hundreds of terms. It's the most important thing. So that area of thinking and understanding and being able to reflect of one's own thinking, those are absent or not talked about. Some people are probably lucky. They developed it anyway. I'm quite certain it must have happened at some instant for some people. But most people have to do with being unconscious or unaware. And I would say until now, because quantum mechanics shows that even for that crude material world, the intellect, the observer's choice, is important. And all of a sudden, there is a defense for being human once more. And it oddly comes from an unexpected direction, namely physics. Yes, it's a shock, Kalle. I will look into the book Shodo, The Art of Coordinating Mind, Body and Brush by William Reed. It is published by Japan Publication and it's from the year 1989. One chapter here. The hand is quicker than the eye. Increasingly in the modern world, all things are set aside for the sake of convenience or efficiency. The brush is hardly an efficient writing instrument. It is much harder to use than stiff and hard-tipped writing instruments like the ballpoint pen or electronic word processing equipment. Sorry to laugh, it was some year ago, of course. We don't have that anymore. The brush was once the primary writing instrument of daily life in Japan. And most people assume that it has simply evolved into forms more suitable for the demands of modern life. It is neither desirable nor practical to go back to using the brush in daily life, but we should consider how it might be useful in developing certain endangered sensibility. For all human faculties, whether brain, nerve, or muscle, lack of use leads to lack of function. The atrophication of human sensibilities was something that Aldous Huxley, what is the chance, warned us of in his novel Brave New World. the story's poetic hero of humanity, Helmholtz Watson felt as if he had something important to say, and the power to say it, but lacked the means to do so. A quote from Helmholtz: "If there were only some different way of writing, or something else to write about." Huxley criticized the loss of individuality in the world, drugged with servitude and pleasure. This futuristic world was characterized by convenience and lack of effort. People did not need to use their hands because everything was done for them. What happens when people stop using their hands and rely on machines and labor-saving devices to do the majority of daily tasks? Huxley's warning to all of us: use it or lose it. People often do not realize how far the deterioration has gone until they attempt to concentrate using their hands for an artistic or creative task. Dolphins are considered to be extremely intelligent, but never have they produced a culture. Biologists and anthropologists agreed that it was the development of hands with opposable thumbs which enabled human beings to develop culture, while other creatures of high brain capacity did not. Without the hand, there would be no art and no written language. The Japanese character for brush, fuda, is a picture symbol of a hand holding a primitive brush. Brain physiologists have clearly established that large areas of the brain are closely coordinated with eye and hand movement, far out of proportion with other parts of the body. This is what I try to show here. There is no doubt but that the manual dexterity and eye-hand coordination promote brain development. The Latin roots of the word emancipation suggest the act of taking, capere, out of the hand, which is manu, emancipation. To emancipate means to free the hands, presumably from manual labor or shackles. Other English words deriving from the Latin root for hand include manual, manacles, manicure, manufacture, manifest, maneuver, manuscript, manipulate, légèrement. The Japanese language too recognizes a wide variety of association for the word hand. Teishu, including the following: help, hitode, and means are or ways, shoda, trick or technique, sonote, turn or move, teban, allowance, teate. Modern conveniences have emancipated the Japanese from many of the tasks and burdens which were once a routine part of daily life. Technology needs no advocate in Japan. But many of the younger generation in Japan have stopped doing the things which traditionally maintained a high degree of manual dexterity. It is easier to ask than to do. At a typical suburban elementary school in Osaka, a psychologist discovered that 1/3 of children typically draw human figures without any fingers. Clearly, fingers were not something that played a central role in their body awareness. Something that the Japanese state has now filed to manage against. They feel it to be so terrifying that the hands is no longer present among children. I was thinking to myself, how many Swedish children do not put their hands into drawings? I think I've seen 2 or 3 drawings with hands in Swedish children. It's very uncommon. It is not an important thing. The brush is an extension of the self. Japanese brush is made of usually bamboo and strings, which I usually call felt, or the actual brush. It has an inherent imbalance. You don't support anything when you do it. So you just hold it like this. And that movement can only work if you are freed up. So it's a controlling agency for being freed up. If you tense, you need to put your hand down like this. But this, it doesn't work if you're tense. The brush is an extension of the self. What we put on paper is a visible manifestation of what we are inside. By learning to control the brush, we can produce better calligraphy, but through the brush, we also gain better self-control. When mind and body are divided, life easily becomes twisted, out of joint. By coordinating mind, body and brush, we can learn to calm and focus the mind on the task at hand. The brush as an instrument of power, the nature of talent. The cormorant bird is used by fishermen in Japan to catch fish. It has a quick eye and a ready strike, but it is not allowed to swallow its catch. Fishermen attached a tight ring around its throat and let the bird catch fish for them. Nature's choice resources are often the first to be taken because they are so readily seen. In the same way, the finest trees are often the first to be taken for lumber. Even preconscious children may find their talents quickly spoken for, only to end up in a gilded cage of another's making. Thus, in the Oriental view, the early appearance of talent is not an auspicious sign. It is the hawk, not the cormorant bird, which represent the true nature of talent. The hawk conceals its talents until the moment they are needed, and is ready to use them anytime. Falconry is a sport that was cultivated by the elite members of the samurai warrior class. In it they found an ingenious example for the use of the sword. A sword must be kept in its sheath for most of the time if it is to remain serviceable for use. Energy to the Japanese is found in the intensity of restraint, not in the reckless frenzy of release. Often the person really in power is the general in the tent, silent, calm, even taciturn. We see this in the reversed mask of the Noh drama and in the imperturbable face of the martial artist. This sense of reserve is misleading, for it conceals a spirited power within. When this force is brought to the fore, it is often fleet as lightning. In this way, Japanese organizations are often very hard to read and may take gravitatingly long to make a decision. But once it is made, people are mobilized very quickly. The Chinese sometimes compare the feeling of holding the brush to a dragon's claw. But dragons are always portrayed with their talons fully extended. And if the comparison is overdone in calligraphy, the arm becomes too tense. The point in Shodo is not to be ever tense for action. The power that the artist unleashes in the strokes spring from a state of reserve or potential energy. Beginners often became fatigued after a short period of calligraphy practice because they have not yet learned how to use this latent strength. They expend too much energy when it is yet learn how to use the latent strength. Poor timing results in poor quality work. Latent talent is more useful than talent which is always on display, particularly in crisis. Outside of the classroom, intelligence is measured not by what you already know, but by how you perform when you do not know the answer in advance. The sensitivity of the brush is a constant reminder that we must be fully relaxed and attentive in order to cope with the task at hand. Properly used, the brush helps cultivate a free and adaptable state of mind. Keep the center line of the brush in contact with the surface of the paper. We have seen how the proper control of the brush brings the tip of every hair into contact with the paper, and how the inochige at the center of the brush are among the longest and most resilient of bristles, and that contact is palpable with high quality handmade paper. Most people are accustomed to machine-made paper, which is smooth to the touch and firm enough to provide the resistance needed for a hard-tip writing utensils. But the brush is soft-tipped, The stem is usually hollow and made of wood, which makes it a good conductor for the delicate vibrations of the brush etching the surface of the paper. Good paper gives the brush a slight resistance, just as ice resists skate. How do you recognize handmade paper? If you hold it up to the light, you can see the thin lines of the surface on which it was made, and even some slight irregularities in the surface. Machine-made paper is more likely to be of an even consistency, less permeable to light. The cheaper kinds of paper are manufactured to be smooth on one side and rough on the other. It is best to avoid using this kind of paper, but if you must, the rough side is more likely to give you the resistance that you need. Resistance to the roughened surface produces the delicate sound of the brush on paper and tells you that you are in touch. While holding the brush properly, the best way to keep the center line in contact with the paper is to feel whether the hairs are actually etching the surface continuously or occasionally skipping across it. When the brush is used correctly, the tips of the hairs run parallel to the stroke in the wake of the line. The brush may lean forward or back slightly in the direction of the stroke. But if the brush is held at an angle pointing away from the stroke, then the tips of the hairs also point off at an angle to the line. This causes only a small number of hairs of the brush to be actually involved in the painting stroke. Like a whip, the impact of the bristles is strongest at the tip. The greater the number of bristle tips which strikes the surface, the stronger the line appears. When a stroke
Yes.
So you see, it's a movement, and it's the movement that is interesting, how you do it. So it is like a verbal thing, whereas Western calligraphy has a tendency to be a bit more static. You can adjust. The order of the stroke is not as important, sometimes not mentioned. Here, we are going to the fractal wave, I would say. Listen to this. Begin the stroke clearly. Accelerate without hesitation. Come to a clean stop. Things that goes for action and thinking alike are trained here. The ability, as Julian Jaynes said, to open up a space, using the right tool when needed. If you need to think of a special thing, what tool should I do? And in what pace should I do the thinking? One thing that this train, some things that other neurologists have checked into, East Asians are able to look at one thing from different angles. How is this trained? Well, you train angular movement here. Angles, it's something that you constantly train. Whereas in Western cultures, this is how I grew up, I'm an engineer, I thought that angles were fixed. I did actually grow up in a Euclidean space. And then I had to learn when I was 27 that space is non-Euclidean. Although I didn't know about the Klein bottle, this is non-Euclidean as well. What a shock! So you see the difference. In Japan, Korea, they learn more and more about angles. Whereas in the Pythagorean West, angles are fixed and they're usually 90 degrees. Not always, but usually they are 90 degrees. Precisely speaking, there are no truly simple lines in calligraphy. A single stroke, such as the character for the number 1, ichi, has a distinct beginning, middle, and end, creating a definite articulation at both ends. Even a small dot painted with a brush should contain all 3 stages. Though they might be quite subtle, articulating the stroke in 3 stages is called ki-hitsu, so-hitsu, shu-hitsu. Helps you execute it with purpose from the beginning to the end. How similar this sounds to the Samkhya or the Veda, where body, the sharp agency or the intellect, if you like, uses its tools, but it also knows how to start, how to proceed, and how to stop. Maybe a very, very important feature of thinking, because if you overthink something, it doesn't turn out nice. If you don't start your thinking properly by a clear start, usually that thinking won't end up in a good result. All these things can be seen in an MRI these days. We did not know about this, let's say 15, 20 years ago. Nevertheless, the sense of articulation can be overdone. Many basic strokes in calligraphy are not actually straight lines, but start and end with a slight articulation. Beginners usually try to produce the accented shape at the end of the stroke by slowly drawing an outline of that shape with the brush. This does produce a likeness in form, but articulating the stroke in this way forces the brush to move at a single speed from beginning to end, with no sense of acceleration or rhythm. The proper way to articulate the end of the stroke is by accelerating to a clean stop, not by drawing the shape. The acceleration of the brush causes a gradual thickening of the lines, while the rapid stop causes the bristle to fan out and create a sudden thickening of the stroke. The effect is similar to that of a skier coming out of a long descent to a hairpin stop, causing the snow to pile up suddenly. The sudden suspension of movement does not throw the skier off balance, but enables him to strike off in a new direction with full control and balance. So you see here Julian Jaynes and Barbara Tversky and neurologists like Bradle and Friedman shows thinking needs to be distinctive, but it also needs to have different accelerating speeds. People who are not good at thinking, they use the same speed constantly, like the world was flat or homogeneous. This is called the default, and it causes thinking to be not effective. The world is in flux or movement, Therefore, thinking has to be that. And a movement that goes in the same time, that movement cannot store fractality. It doesn't inform. So we know less fractality is less both awareness, sharpness, observation, and knowledge, information, materiality. These goes hand in hand, and they are interconnected, but at the same time separated. All these terms do have their equivalence in the Hindi tradition or the Vedic tradition. There they use different categories or space words or definitions to show how to improve your thinking. Because if you learn the base, I think you don't need the brush to that extent anymore. It is in the beginning. When you learn how to accelerate, how to make angles in thinking, how to develop fractality, which is incredibly important. You know that from Susie Frobel. People who don't develop fractal thinking, they can't understand time or space. And although they might score high on IQ test, they don't progress in work or research. So this is training of thinking and body at the same time. Another thing that I come to think of is, if you tense, the movement becomes less nice, not as eloquent, not as elegant. And this is a way of training your thinking to be smooth, not jumping into bifurcation, either or, dichotomies. Dichotomies, we know, are not very helpful. I am looking for something that is not with dongle. It did not help me. But this is a very good example how bad thinking is constructed. It goes into contradictions. Not my point, it is the point of Edvard de Bono, of course. But this is the demise of Western thinking in total. Today, if you start to study, that was my experience, you meet people who put everything into categories. And that's it. In the end, the only thing you learn is how to put oppositions together. And it can be done by a computer, trust me, we did that. Yeah, Kalle.
A pedantic question from this book.
Yeah.
You quoted it in the beginning. I love the quotation.
Wait the quotes later.
Okay.
I don't, because I'm into this now.
Okay. Excuse me.
Any other questions with this?
No, not so far.
Keep the flow of energy between the strokes on and off the paper. We will consider the difference between formal and informal script styles in a later chapter. But it's worth noting here that different styles use different stroke endings, which are produced by a different use of the brush. In theory, formal stroke endings are produced by lifting the brush vertically from the page, clearly accenting the end of the stroke. For informal stroke endings, the brush is lifted on a diagonal as a continuation of the stroke. It is unusual, however, to find a style which is all one or the other. Like the clothing that we wear, there are many degrees of formality. The formal style of writing is characterized by articulation. Each stroke is written separately. The brush is lifted off the paper at the end of the stroke, almost at right angles to the page. It is permissible to adjust the brush between stroke as needed, though preferably not in the middle of a character. It needs to be consistent. Formal scripts build each character architecturally, stroke by stroke. The more abbreviated cursive styles of writing are characterized by fluidity. The brush is lifted off the paper on a diagonal line as an extension of the stroke itself. The strokes are intertwined rather than assembled, and to adjust the brush between strokes in the cursive style would break the ki miyaku, the flow of ki, or something that we went into earlier, the prana. And to understand what prana is, we need to train our hands. There is no definition of prana. We can never understand it by words only. We need to train it. The reason why Westerners don't understand prana / ki chi is we have no experience of it. It is not in our culture. Definition would put us in the wrong ballpark, so to speak. We need to know what it is. It is like explaining to a person of the Amazon basin that never seen a car what a car is. It would be impossible. It would be disastrous. It may seem to be a near impossible task to gauge the many factors of pressure, ink, speed and form. Experience is the best guide, but there is one little known shortcut, and that is to fully saturate the brush with ink. If you only apply ink to the tip of the brush, you will find that the bristles become tangled and twisted very easily. But if you fill your straw with water, you can keep the water from leaking out as long as you keep your fingertip tightly over the upper end of the straw. As soon as air is allowed to enter at the top, the water pours out. If the tip is sealed at one end, the only way to get the water out is to suck on the straw at the open end. In Chinese lore, there is a story of a blade which cut very well, but did not wear. The large cleaver used in Oriental cooking is named after an imperial Chinese cook who lived during the period of the civil wars, around 200 or 300 BC. The prince noted that his cook had an exceptionally ability to cleave meat from the bone without damaging or dulling the blade. He could cut very close to the bone. His movements were intriguing, clean, rhythmic, and uninhibited. The cook explained that the secret of this craft lay in the search for the tao, or the door in Japanese. When the beginner cuts meat, he looks at the side of the beef. He hacks his way through it by sight, wearing out a new blade every month. After 3 years, he learns to... Could you just turn the alarm off? He learns to feel his way by hand and need not look at the structure of the bone and muscle. After long years, if he masters his trade, the meat yields to the blade without resistance. He no longer looks at the meat, but finds his way effortlessly in the natural harmony of the way. In this way, the cook has used the same knife for 19 years, though its blade was as sharp and smooth as new. Many Oriental stories suggest the importance of sensing intuitively rather than relying on sight alone. Stories of blind master swordsmen can only be interpreted in this way. The eye is not as good a judge of proportion and balance as we would like to think, as any beginning driver can tell you. The eye is easily fooled by optical illusions. Magic tricks depend for their effectiveness on the fact that the hand is often quicker than the eye. The sense of balance depends to a greater degree on visceral or internal factors than on visual cues, or at least it should. I think I just have to get fascinated here. In India, I was often questioned, and we had discussions with the Indians, often very good in English, and they asked about my thinking tools, and I could present none. And I remember one wise fellow called Vishnu, like the god. He could have like 50, 60 different. And I realized that what he told me was incredibly important, but I could not fit it in anything I know before. And now, when coming with fractality and understanding that thinking is fractal and learning how to do speed, do difference, not doing repetition. As I showed before here, when I had this, our wish for existence or stability, it also goes for our thinking. In the same speed, in the same direction, without knowing any angles. Angles are incredibly important to have reflection. There can be no consciousness without reflection. Here, they all look the same, they all go in the same direction. And that sort of thinking is a deaf thinking. It is an absolute instability, lack of energy, and it will not be stable. It's a thinking that is not decisive, and you will not be able to pick out your good thinking and sort of weigh them to each other and say, this is good thinking, that is bad. There are 3 reasons for that. We don't have, as the Indians call Atma, that is self-reflection, thinking of your thinking. Most Westerners, I think is 85%, according to Yuri Havavel, cannot reflect over their own thinking, which is disastrous. And that means they cannot sort bad thinking out, they cannot develop better thinking. So everything is on the outside. How can I explain it? It's like the information is in the book only. It is not in my movement. It's scary. And I remember one Chinese, another country I went to, he was absolutely shocked. We said, everything is here. It needs to be here too. And you can only learn that for somebody who already know. A master, a teacher, a professor. We brought a professor who didn't know anything. He was like a child. He just simply reacted. He was belligerent, he was aggressive. I think the shock coming from this confrontation was tremendous. And I met some of those people for a couple of years ago, and some of them, they just changed careers. They would never want to go back after that rather harsh feedback. But we need to train our thinking. We did do that. That happened in the 16th, 17th century. We used the brush pen, and that helps. It wasn't a coincidence. It was something that trained balance, speed, fractality, I would say also depth of understanding. This is a rather shallow understanding. It has deep. I didn't go into the depth. But once I got more sophisticated, more calm, I could use my thinking. I didn't buy 2 mouses. Mice or mouses? Mouses, I think. I didn't buy 2 mouses. Only bought 1. And then I realized, oh my God, they put in both Bluetooth and dongle. Better safe than sorry. I actually think of our ex-minister in finances. He was famous appearing on television with both the straps to keep his pants up and a belt. He had both. This has both as well. Yeah.
No, this is a pedantic question. I know
Yeah.
that, but I love this.
We take it after. We're going to have some exercise. But
Okay,
if
okay.
anything connected to this?
No, there is. It was a lovely book. I remember when we did calligraphy at school in the 80s.
Oh, did you know?
Yes, little bit. Like handwriting, still 80s. We had it. We had a Finnish teacher who was rather stern. But it disturbed me already then that there was no order in which order you should put the letters. It's so random.
It is like, and I think it's a good point though that you brought up there, because it means that some people, there are three things to that. Some people, I think I had that ability. I made up an order for myself and I kept to it. But why should I have to make that up? And think of my fellow students who didn't make it up in a good order, or even worse, randomly did it. And randomly is the worst thing because it's harder to remember. Because in the order, if I have my keys, I do it in order. I start the cars with an order. Well, I put the gear shift in, I put the clutch down. It's an order. It's so easy to remember. So not having an order to calligraphy, I think that's a good point, Kalle, to how we in West do mistakes. Why not have order? It's an important thing. Of course, now we know it thanks to 1100 lectures and we understand fractality, which is order. It's nothing but order. But it is... Well, we take a pause and then some exercise.
Ska jag tända?
Nej, det ser jättebra ut. Du kan stå så ett tag. Det ser väldigt bra ut. Och så sätter du dig. Och så tänker vi att du sätter dig som de här herrarna som sitter nere i Brunnsparken på parkbänken med en fimp i ena handen. Kan låtsas att du har den i vänsterhanden. Ja, just det. Ofta, i princip alltid, så har de... det här är lite obehagligt då, Kalle, men du får stå ut. Du sätter det ena benet över det andra och så sätter du knäskål. Ja, precis så, ja. Och så nästan att högerfoten hamnar bakom vaden på vänsterbenet. Klarar du det? Nej, det är fel ben. Det är fel. Det är rätt. Gå tillbaka där du har. Och så den högra foten ska bakom vänster vad. Nej. Ibland, jag har sett det då. Vad som händer är här att man skärper av hela kroppen. Orsaken är naturligtvis att de vill blockera ut baksmällor och drogobehag och andra saker i deras liv. Framtiden, vad som har hänt innan då. Och problemet med de här ställningarna, det är också att de blockerar priming. Så då kan man inte få feedback på priming på samma sätt då. Jag tror vi behöver det. Dels behöver vetenskapen som säger att priming alltid fungerar. Men jag tror vi behöver också från ett personligt perspektiv. Alltså vår inre upplevelse. Jag kommer att tänka på det nu när vi pratade om kalligrafi. Att det är först när man upplever ki man kan förstå det. Och i princip så är alla förklaringar av ki onödiga tills dess att man verkligen har en bokstavlig upplevelse om det. Och de här översättningarna om energi, ja, visst de kan fungera, men de kan också ge motsatt resultat. Så att det liksom, ja, man säger att en energi, jag vet vad en energi är, jag har radioapparater, jag har brödrostar hemma, så jag vet nog vad energi är. Och då bör man tänka i termer av, energin är ju det som driver bilen så att den sticker iväg. Och helt plötsligt så är man fullständigt fel banor då. Så det är lurigt det där. Och i och med att vi västerlänningar inte har en förståelse för att, som Wittgenstein är väl kanske ett av de få undantagen då, skriver lite grann att doing is understanding. Genom att göra något så förstår vi det. Och han inkluderar även språket. Så språket förstås genom att vi gör språket. Och han tycker att det var infantilt, liksom att alla ord, som han själv sa, ska vi notera. Personen han kritiserar i boken Filosofiska undersökningar, eller personerna, Vilka är de två?
Augustinus och Platon.
Ja, jag skulle väl... Platon är med där på törn, men jag skulle säga att det är Augustinus och han själv. Författaren till Traktatus då. Som hade en absurd naiv syn på verkligheten. Och det var ju att för varje ord så var det en monosemisk betydelse. Och som då pekar ut en sak i världen. Och sen tog det honom 25 år att inse att det var något som absolut inte stämde med det här då. Så vi får hjälpa kroppen på vägen. Och jag tror en grundförutsättning för att känna igen framgången och känna in ki, det är att vi ska ge primingen en möjlighet att nå hjärnkontoret eller känslan då, så att vi känner det. För paradoxalt nog med de här drogpåverkade, I've been speaking Swedish, sorry. The paradoxical thing about these people using drugs is they don't even feel the drugs because they shut off, they close their bodies. What we want to do is open up the body for sensing once more and do that at the same time as priming. Yes, I know I'm adding more and more layers to it, but this is how it's done. This is not a simple business when it comes to projecting, but it's still easy. But it has many different layers. We will now try to put Kalle into the best possible position. And to do that, we don't need an Alexander teacher. We only want to ask him to feel his sitting bones, where he's sitting. And ask him to tilt forward and backwards. And here you can see that he's no longer bending his body in the stomach, he's bending it in the hip, where the joint is. By sitting so, he makes it possible for the priming to be felt. It will still be there, but in order for it to be not blocked off, we need to let the body loose, so to speak. When you have the opportunity, you can also open up the hands. Yes, that could be a good thing to do. Of course, this is just a couple of minutes every hour. Say 3 minutes every hour, not much. But you're sitting down working at the computer, your laptop, or writing, or watching television. Do make sure you always sit on your sitting bone. There is no reason, never ever, to not sit on the sitting bones. Yes, it's not the sitting on the sitting bones that do the thing, but it will help you in the understanding. And once you understand, you gain intention, motivation. You see the change. And one of the reasons I really point to this, I've been feeling very clearly the last weeks, the difference in thinking. And I would love you others to have that change as well. It is massive. It is like, first in the beginning, I was thinking clouded. I was not awake. And then I realized, hey, thinking uses different practical tools. And I've been sloppy using the same tool for everything. Dividing everything in right and wrong. And what is happening in front of the camera here now, he is all of a sudden letting go of those habitual tensions. Habitual tensions that has as one purpose block sensory appreciation of the body. So you see how important it is not to block it off. And another thing that one could do is to block it off, to do bad things to the body, is to put your feet under the chair. You can do that. This will make it impossible to keep on the sitting bone. And it has already happened. When you're skilled, you can possibly sit like that. But never ever do that in the beginning. So never ever sit with the feet under the chair. They should be at least 90 degrees from the knee. But 90 is okay, doesn't have to be more. Yeah. So those are things to follow that will make priming easier to detect. And the thing he's doing with his hand now, this is helping the body a little bit like I was talking about calligraphy earlier. And in the movement of calligraphy, it is almost impossible to keep too much tension. So in order to do the painting or the calligraphy, the writing maybe, you need to have a certain tension but also a certain relaxation. The opening of the hands that Kalle does here is very good. I think he's been doing that for quite some while because he knows how to do it. This is similar to calligraphy because it makes it harder to keep tensions in his shoulders. Let's see if I can leave this thing here for a second. So we can go both ways. We can prime this side of the body to be more open. Think of it as dorsal fluffy. But we can also help the system because when the hand is open, it is somehow tougher to tense. Naturally, it is easier to go into relaxation.
But the sitting bones, are they white, fluffy or black?
The white, which is the back of your body here, going up to the spine here, going over the head, going half of the eyes, going down here, and not including the ears, going this way, up there. And the more you can, you will notice once you train the priming, that the priming develops. I don't know if you have felt that yet, but you will feel it. Because every day you train this for 10, 15, 20 minutes. It will mean in the end you can sort of discern when it's working better or worse. What I have noticed, I'll just get my coffee. What I have noticed is that when I can get the head, we can try that. You can, I think you can leave your hands. You should not do that more than 3-4 minutes a day. An hour. Now you can just sit in whatever manner you want to. Let's try this. This is very close to what John Appleton asked us to do. So you can stand up and sit down, please. And you can walk forwards, and then you can go back and sit down again. Very good. Fantastic. So now you'll prime yourself and do the whole body, dorsal and ventral, but especially what's in the face, with the ear being ventral. The ventral goes under the chin. It goes up your upper part of the chin to your lips, to the thing below the nose, whatever that is called, the hole there. And it goes on the side of the nose to the eyes, and half of the eyes, approximately where the eyelid is, will be ventral. and add that to the rest of the ventral dorsal of the body, and do that for a couple of minutes. This can also be boosted. It can be boosted that you feel that there is a sort of elongation in the area of the mouth and the nose. So they stick out more. It's almost like you're turning a little bit like a crocodile. Not so much, but a little bit like a crocodile. That will actually help the priming. So you push it a bit wider than what is normally perceived. That is already very good color. Just continue to prime that way. And go up now, Kalle. Through the door. And there you can turn and come back. And have a seat. So what happened with this priming was very clear. You're an excellent subject to work with, Kalle. Thank you very much. It is always a pleasure. I will try to, I can't do it as well, but if you have a look, see what I do, Kalle, is that without priming, I get up in this manner. This could lead, or this shoulder could lead like this, and this is very exaggerated. Nobody walks like this. But you get the understanding. But with, I prime, and I think of some sort of elongation going up. All of a sudden, the head is leading more. And it's not 100%, it's just a bit more. And I can feel the difference, it's very clear. It is easier to walk around. And this is the same thing happened when we trained with John Appleton here. We walked out here. I've seen it on the video so many times. And all of a sudden we are leading with our heads. But it takes practice not only to learn it, but even more interesting to appreciate it, to like it. Because we are so used to being like the drug addict, shutting the body out. Because we are traumatized. This is what we're saying in the series. We inherited a trauma from the Greek. We are behaviorally inclined to shut off our bodies and thereby our thinking. But the more we appreciate it, the more we do it. But if I tell you, you have to do it, it won't work. It needs to come from the inside, so to speak. And this is the reason I'm so positive to priming, because it doesn't tell you to do something.
But the sitting bones, I have to admit, it's tiresome to sit on sitting bones. But mentally, the sitting bones, are they black or white?
Well, they are actually on the dorsal part of the body.
So I have to think of black, but it doesn't really help the issue.
No, but you don't have specifically to point them out. But what I'm saying, it's a practical side to add to the priming. And that is sitting in a way that doesn't block your appreciation. So I can feel now, what happened to me is I feel better now when I'm priming. So I get a reward. And that reward is absolutely important. I can just tell you a story. Alexander technique is sometimes like a sect. And he used to be this teacher to one of my friends who's a teacher herself now, in a big group. She was singled out and shouted at. You misuse yourself. This is bad. And I had the pleasure of meeting this redhead lady as well. And she also said the same thing to me, more or less. So that is not the way to go about. That's the true sect, not what we're doing. That's the true sect. And priming is softer. Priming doesn't demand. When I get up like this, let's do Alexander here. If I go up this way, forward, head forward and up, let the leg be free so the head can go forward and up. And I'm already tensing. I'm already tense now. I can feel it here. Because I had to perform. Is it correct? Is it correct? That will never ever work. In the same instant you think, is it correct? You're gone. Ian McGilchrist will call that, is it correct? Or the second thinking about something, the second thoughting is always the left hemisphere. And the left hemisphere, it doesn't know anything about movement at all. It's not responsible for movement. So, but it's very obedient, either to a book or a teacher or an idea you have in yourself. But priming is so much softer. And it doesn't demand you to perform, succeed or anything. It is just nice. But what I want you to get is some reward. And if you stop blocking your body, that reward will come easy. So, as I said with the drug addict, he's blocking out all the bad things and all the good things as well. So, this is giving the priming more of a chance. It is not the same thing as priming. It's not as important as priming. But it's helping the priming on the way by not blocking out positive or negative feelings from the body. The reason we tense, in my idea, is that we want to block out things. And in the end, what do? We block out the positive as well. Because children are always happy. They always laugh, they're really fun. But they don't block out bad feelings and they don't block out the happy feelings. They get angry, they cry, but they're also happy and enjoyable. So this is helping the priming on the way, an extra help. And Kalle, although he's very sick, he seems much stronger now after this. And it's not a long exercise even. We've been at it for 14 minutes. So you see, very small things. Priming doesn't make you sweat. You don't have to take a shower, nothing. And you can do it. The more you train it, the more you can do it while doing other things. I can do it while driving, not in the town, but on the country road. Maybe one day I will be able to do it while I drive downtown. I would say the hardest things to do priming at the same time is thinking hard. Well, especially this morning when I got the idea for the first lecture today, I was very enthusiastic. And that stopped me from priming. I got too anxious and I lost myself. And that's nothing bad. There's no judging here. It is, the whole idea is to get aware of these things. That's the clever thing, to get aware of it without judging, without saying, oh, hey, that is not a Bluetooth mouse. Why? Well, because it has a dongle. No, it has both. It is both wave and particle. Some nice fellow made both. I don't know why. Okay, I say thank you very much. Kalle, you're the best. Take it easy.